We all dream of getting our hands on something that will make us rich overnight, like a treasure or lottery. But what if someone promises to make all those dreams come true, and it all turns out to be a lie? Today's story is about one such lottery scam, where thousands of people were cheated. And the most shocking part is that the entire scam started with just a single letter. Winning the lottery feels like a dream come true, something that can change anyone's life overnight. And it was this very thought and dream of people that two men, a father and son, took advantage of. They created such a lottery scam where thousands of people kept playing again and again, falling deeper into the trap they had laid. This is the story of the biggest lottery scam in American history, where more than 10,000 people were duped and their lives were ruined forever. So who were these con men? A father and son duo? How did they pull off the biggest lottery scam in America? And was this entire scam ever exposed? What you'll hear will truly shock you. The mastermind behind this scam was named James Houston, who lied to people and made an enormous fortune. But because of his lies, many lives were destroyed. The story begins in the 1980s, a time when technology wasn't that advanced and the internet had not yet entered our lives. It was a time when people used to write letters to have long conversations with one another. And that was the method through which people far away could communicate. But James Houston saw a perfect opportunity in this, one that could help him con people. Before we go further into the story, we need to understand who James Houston was and how he turned from a common man into a con artist who shook all of America with his scam. James was born in 1940 into a family where everyone worked hard to earn an honest living. No one in his house was a thief or con artist. This clearly means James had no connection to crime from his childhood. He was also a bright student from the beginning. As he grew older, his personality kept improving, which would later help him a lot. Since his teenage years, he always found some way or the other to earn money, sometimes by doing house chores for neighbors or by selling small items to make a little income. James had a knack for persuading people, and this talent often helped him extract money from their pockets. And this very skill would take a dangerous turn that would change everything. Because of this talent, James started to notice people's weaknesses and began exploiting them to cheat them. By the time the 1980s came, James had already started executing small scams, fooling shopkeepers nearby with fake schemes. You could say he was practicing for bigger crimes. What made James especially dangerous wasn't just his way with words. It was his vision. Where others thought small, he always thought big and dangerous. Because of this very thinking, James started to believe that instead of cheating local people with small cons, he should target people around the world. That's why he was later able to scam thousands of people successfully. One day, while sitting and thinking, a cunning idea struck him. He thought, why not exploit people's greed and impatience by trapping them in a fake lottery when they can never escape from? This entire scam was so brilliantly designed that anyone who got caught in it kept getting drawn back in again and again. By the 1990s, James had become the mastermind of a scam no one had ever imagined or heard of, a fake lottery. Though James was the mastermind, no big scam can be pulled off without a great team behind it. So to execute this scam, James needed a team he could trust, people who were just as clever and cunning as him. James started building a team. But the people joining this team weren't ordinary criminals. They were experts in planning and strategy. The first person to join was Sonny Houston, James's own son. That's why James trusted Sonny the most. Where James planned and executed the scam, Sonny handled the logistics, ensuring fake lottery letters were sent out on time and tracking them. Sonny was as loyal to his father as he was skilled in his work. Because of Sonny, those letters reached thousands of people, and they became victims of the fake lottery scam. Next comes the most important member of the gang, Dennis, also known as the salesman of this operation. Dennis was the one who designed each scam letter. You could say Dennis was the reason they were all making money. He created the perfect trap by designing postcards and letters so professionally that anyone who saw them would be fooled. He used high-quality logos that looked authentic and professional. And the letters had wording that convinced people to fall right into the trap. Dennis knew exactly how to get into people's minds. He even used to say, all we need to do is send them one letter and they'll keep sending us money. And Dennis was absolutely right. Because the people who were scammed kept playing again and again, hoping to win one day, while James and his gang's bank accounts kept growing. Though they were making a lot of money, hiding such a massive scam wasn't possible unless there was a proper system to conceal the funds. That's where the international players of this gang come in, operating from places like Costa Rica and Europe. These players were accountants or middlemen who laundered the victims' checks and transferred the money to various accounts. They made sure these transactions were so complicated that even if someone tried to trace them, they wouldn't be able to reach the source. And that's why law enforcement took several years to even come close to uncovering them. The thing that made James and his gang even more dangerous when it came to tracking transactions was their discipline, because they never did anything in a hurry, and every letter they designed and every dollar they laundered was fully well planned. They had no mercy for any victim, because for them, all of this was just business, and all victims were merely numbers written on paper. Nevertheless, due to James' brain and his loyal team, this scam was showing no signs of stopping. And for many years to come, they managed to convince over 10,000 people that by playing the lottery, their dreams could also come true. But the biggest question is, how did they manage to do all this? And when the truth came out in front of people, the ground slipped from beneath their feet. The entire scam began with just one letter that was designed in an excellent and professional manner, and it looked absolutely real. The logos placed on the letter and the way it was written made it seem like it was sent by a big and trustworthy company. And that's exactly where people got fooled, thinking that the good days of their life were about to begin. Whoever received this letter, it would say that they could play big lotteries like the Irish Sweepstakes or the Shamrock Fund with just a small entry fee, and by winning huge amounts of money, they could change their lives. The victims would fall into this trap very easily after seeing the letter. But the truth was, there was no lottery ticket, and no lottery winner, and the money the victims sent was never returned. Even after doing all this, James and his gang were still not satisfied. They wanted these victims to keep sending money not just once, but again and again. And they succeeded in designing the scam in such a way that the victims got trapped and kept sending money until they were completely drained. Whenever these victims sent the entry fee to play the lottery, a few days later, they would receive a small amount check, usually between $10 to $15. This is where the most brilliant phase of the scam began, because James designed it in such a way that no victim could escape from it. These small amount checks sent to the victims couldn't be cashed, because according to the lottery company's rules, these checks could only be cashed once their total amount reached $5,000. This was the move James played, and all the victims believed that by continuing to play, they would eventually reach $5,000. These fake checks also made them believe the lottery was real. Now, all the victims began sending money repeatedly to James' gang, hoping that one day they would surely win up to $5,000. But they were unaware that they were being deceived and that their lives were about to be destroyed. As the scam continued to grow, James played another new card, called the pension plan. According to this plan, victims were told that a portion of the entry fee they paid to play the lottery was being invested in a special account, and in the future, they would be able to receive regular monthly payouts from it. It was just like a retirement plan. Many victims started to believe that their money was safe because they weren't gambling. But the truth here was the same as the lottery scam. There was no account, no pension, and they were never going to receive any money. Among all these victims was a 91-year-old woman who believed she was building a better future for her grandson and granddaughter. That's why she carefully kept every letter, every fake check, and every fake receipt, thinking that when the time came, she would be able to claim her money. That old woman had saved every penny because she believed she was investing for her children's good future and that she would definitely get the money back. But when the police told her about the scam, she broke down. She said the scammers didn't just steal her money. They shattered her dreams too. Now, whenever the victims sent checks to James' team, the first step was to make that money disappear. The first thing they did was send the money to different bank accounts. Then, through these accounts, the money was sent to Costa Rica, where James and his team operated from. After reaching Costa Rica, The money was sent to different shell company accounts in Europe. Then that money was invested in luxury apartments and luxury cars there. James also had several fake identities. People knew him as Rex Rogers, Mide Mulligan, Jordan Gabby, and Sunray Star. At one point, he even ran for governor of Nevada, which made people trust the scam even more. Because of James' scam, most of the victims sank into debt, but they still believed that by winning a big lottery, they would get the $5,000 payout. James and his gang were earning massive wealth from this scam because they understood human nature, completely driven by greed and impatience. They weren't just looting the victims of their money. They were playing with their emotions. Most of their targets were elderly people who lived alone or had no one. These letters contained messages about quickly becoming rich and changing lives. And after reading them, people started to believe that this was their last hope for happiness. They easily trusted it. James understood this very well, which is why he turned people's hope into a weapon and used it against them to earn massive wealth. Nevertheless, when the police finally uncovered this entire scam, they were left stunned, because this wasn't just a scam, it was an industrial-level fraud in which, by now, the victims had already lost $20 million. Every victim's dream was shattered, dreams they had seen for themselves and their families, and that would now never come true. Margaret, a 91-year-old woman who had become a victim of the scam, kept receiving small-amount checks, which made her believe she would soon win the lottery, and so she kept playing. But when the police investigated her case, they found that Margaret barely had enough money left to buy groceries. When the police revealed the scam to her, she asked them, "So where's my money? Where did it all go?" On the other hand, the police learned about another 82-year-old woman who lived alone and had put all her life savings into the scam. When the police spoke to her, she revealed that she had already invested $30,000 in the scam so she could receive regular monthly payouts. Although the entire scam was designed very systematically, as they say, no wrong deed remains hidden forever, and the same happened here too. The scam had become so massive that hiding it was becoming very difficult, and the police were now getting very close to exposing it. But how did they reach James, and how did they catch him? That story is just as astonishing as the scam itself. The investigation began with a single phone call, and that call came to the police from a bank. The person who made the call to the police was a bank accountant, and what the accountant said. The thing she had noticed was that most of the elderly customers at her bank were repeatedly writing checks in the name of the same lottery company. At first, the amounts on these checks were small, but over time they kept increasing. The accountant kept getting suspicious. Why were all the checks going to the same lottery company? Anyway, as soon as the accountant reported this, the police contacted the United States Postal Inspection Service and asked them to investigate the case. The Postal Inspection Service is the agency that investigates any fraud related to letters coming in and going out of the post office. The responsibility of this case was given to Officer Sherry Delaney. At the beginning of the investigation, it looked like a small fraud case. But as Officer Delaney dug deeper into the case, she realized that this wasn't just a petty scam. She started seeing the same lottery company name and the same mailing address again and again. Officer Delaney observed that people from different states in America were sending checks to the same address. And it didn't take her long to understand that this was a huge scam that would require more people to solve. Now, Officer Delaney started working together with an agent from the Internal Revenue Service. She told Agent Frank to trace the money that had reached the lottery companies through these checks. Agent Frank began tracking the checks sent by victims from different American bank accounts. That's when they found out that the transactions were done in Costa Rica, from where the letters were being mailed. The money was then sent to various accounts in Europe, and through multiple transactions, it disappeared. The reason for conducting these transactions from Costa Rica was to make sure no one could trace them. But as Officer Delaney and Officer Frank got closer to the source of these transactions, they realized how organized and large-scale this entire operation was. To make their case stronger, it became very important for the investigators to speak to the victims. But this task was going to be just as difficult as it was emotional. Officer Delaney started knocking on the doors of each victim, telling them they had been scammed because there was no lottery, no pension, and no money left. On hearing this, some victims broke down in tears, and some even refused to believe it. One woman, who had kept all the checks safely till now, looked at Delaney with teary eyes and said, "I was waiting for the money, because everything I had, I invested in this." Officer Delaney said that questioning the victims was the hardest part of the investigation because these weren't just fraud victims. They were victims of broken dreams and lost hope. As both officers kept gathering evidence linked to the scam, they got a lead. There was a mailing center in Costa Rica from where the letters were sent. After this revelation, the police now had a clear target that could be connected to James and his gang's operations. The police hit a major breakthrough when insiders from the scam network gave detailed information to the police. From them, they learned that the mastermind behind this whole scam was James Houston. The second detail that came to light was that James' son Sonny handled the logistics of the scam operation. And the third was that Dennison designed the fraud letters that trapped the victims. James had been running this scam for several years using fake identities to avoid being caught by the police. But now the police had the biggest piece of evidence, the mailing center. James no longer had any place left to hide. The case was slowly beginning to unravel, and James, who had planned the entire scam operation, was soon going to be in police custody. By the year 1995, the police had collected all the evidence they needed. They had the names and account numbers of all the people involved in the scam. But it wasn't going to be easy to dismantle such a massive fraud empire in one blow. Now the police, in collaboration with Interpol, raided James' mailing center in Costa Rica. What they saw there convinced them that they were very close to solving the case. During the raid, they found printing machines, thousands of printed letters, and a list of names who were about to receive these fraud letters. Meanwhile, in the U.S., James' son Sonny was arrested from an office where he handled the logistics of the operation. From Sonny, the police learned that Dennison was at his home, and police arrested him there as well. Two key members of the gang were now in police custody. But James was still on a run. Police suspected James had escaped, but they also knew James believed he would never get caught. That's why they started searching for him in Costa Rica, and their hunch proved right. After a few days of search, James was caught by the police in Costa Rica, where he had been hiding from U.S. law enforcement. After his arrest, federal charges of mail fraud, money laundering, and lottery scam were filed against James and his gang. James was declared the mastermind behind the entire scam. The testimony of the victims played a major role in strengthening the case. They wrote several letters to the court, sharing their stories of devastation caused by the scam. Some victims even came to court and testified, describing how their lifetime savings were stolen by trickery. James' lawyer pleaded in court for leniency, arguing that James was now old and not in good health. But the prosecuting attorney countered by saying that James, an elderly man himself, deliberately targeted old, sick, and lonely people and robbed them of their lifetime earnings. He showed no mercy for them and never thought about the consequences of his actions. The attorney requested the court to give James the harshest possible punishment. Agreeing with the argument, the judge sentenced James to 10 years in prison, a very tough punishment for an elderly man like him. But in the end, all the victims finally got justice. James' son Sonny and partner Dennison were also found guilty of the scam and were sentenced to 7 years in prison. With the three main players behind bars, the entire fraud operation was finally destroyed. The police seized all the printing machines, shut down the printing center, and froze all their bank accounts. Although all the guilty people had been punished, most victims had permanently lost their money, which they would never get back. The officers involved in this investigation said that the loss couldn't be measured in money, because James didn't just steal their money, he stole their hopes and dreams. And after this, the victims would never be able to trust anyone again. James' story teaches us that no matter how organized or big a scam is, it always gets exposed, no matter how cleverly it was executed. The capture of James didn't just end a fraud operation. It was the defeat of a man who thought he could fool people and get away forever. After James' sentencing, the FBI and other federal agencies took several strict steps to prevent such scams in the future. They used advanced technology and tools to track international financial transactions. Law enforcement agencies and consumer protection groups launched several awareness campaigns, educating people to stay away from fake lottery scams. They made it clear that genuine lottery companies never ask for money in advance. And if someone promises a win but asks for money, it's definitely fraud. James' story finally ended forever on January 25, 2012, when he passed away at the age of 68. But his story taught us how greed and impatience can put anyone into big trouble.